All right, right on. So my name is Jeff Chiva Stearns. I am with Spark, and today I'm going to be interviewing Denver Jackson. For those of you who don't know Denver, you're going to get to know Denver very well after this chat because we are going to talk about everything that makes Denver so interested in making animation. And basically, this man is a machine. I know this because I've seen it with my own two eyes. I have witnessed the miracle of a one-man feature-length produced film, which you have basically did everything, probably except for the music, although I'm pretty sure you probably dabbled in that too. Um, we should go back because you and I actually met at, what was it, the Heartland Film Festival?
Yeah, it
Is
was
that
the
the right
Heartland
one?
Film
That was
Festival.
in
Yeah.
Indianapolis. Of
Hmm.
all places to meet, because we're both BC boys, you living in Victoria, me being in Vancouver. We had never met prior to this, but the
No.
one time we did meet is Indianapolis, of all places.
Yeah.
So what led you to Indianapolis? You were there with what film? It was The Wishing Jar, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was The Wishing Jar, a short animated film, and yeah, I was there with my music composer who also composed music on Babylon. I work with two composers. On The Wishing Jar, the other composer actually produced the music on that film. But now, for a feature film, especially if it's like heavily action and there's a lot of fantasy and sci-fi elements, there's almost wall-to-wall music.
For
So
sure.
having a couple composers on there and they work really well together as well. So I was there with Mark Yunker. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
you and
right.
Mark. It was like
Yeah.
the dream team there.
Yeah.
And I remember you guys won Best Animation at that festival, which came
That's
with a
right.
pretty hefty prize money from what I remember too, wasn't it? It was pretty decent.
Yeah. Yeah, and a really beautiful award as well.
Yeah.
It was great.
I was happy for you. And you know what? Then we ran into each other again in Victoria at the Victoria Film Festival, which I think we were drinking a little bit of whiskey that night, which was
Yep.
and you also mentioned it was probably one of the only nights that you took off in how many months at that point, making me
Yeah.
realize that you are pretty much one of the hard, actually, there's two people I know in the world that are the hardest working men in animation, and you are definitely one of them. Howie Shah is the other one. He's out in Toronto, and I have
Cool.
never met animators so dedicated and devoted. I know as animators, we have to be dedicated and devoted, or else things will never get done with the amount of work. But I swear, every time I see any post of anything you're doing online, you're always like knee deep in some kind of production, whether it's a stack of boards, whether it's like, hey, I'm animating this scene. And you know what's nuts, and we'll talk about this, is that you just animate for fun. Like sometimes I saw a post where you're like, oh, I'm just animating this scene from Star Wars because I'm having fun. And
Right.
it kind of blows my mind where I'm like, dude, if you want to have fun, go have some drinks and go out and party. But you're like, no, I'm going to actually do more animation on top of my animation. Um,
Well, I mean, you got to enjoy what you do, right? This is what I would rather be doing in all my time I have, all my free time.
well, I'm glad you found it, man. You found that bliss, man. You found your passion. Um, all right. So basically, let's chat. Let's chat about the very beginnings, man. Like you grew up, so I detect an accent, and I think we've talked about this before. But where did you grow up, and how did sort of that sort of a period in your life influence this sort of decision to want to become an animator of all things?
Right. Yeah, I was born in South Africa. And in South Africa, I started making my own films, hugely inspired by like Jackie Chan, especially seeing the end credits and finding out that films aren't real with all the blooper reels. And so I like got my mom's video camera and I started making my own little short films, all in live action. And then I've always wanted to do animation. I could always draw. I always doodled in class. And when I came to Canada, someone in my high school in grade 10 gave me a copy of Flash, Macromedia Flash, which is now Adobe Animate.
Mm-hmm.
So I started in Macromedia Flash, creating my own animation. I remember actually getting the software on a Friday, installing it on my computer, and not really knowing how to use it. So I spent the entire weekend just reading the how-to manual that came with the software itself because I really wanted to start making animation.
Wow.
And yeah, I just learned everything about the program reading the entire book pretty much of on Flash. And I didn't have a tablet either. So I was animating with a mouse at that time. Just
Wow.
yeah.
It was. I gotta say, man. I was thinking about this the other day. Like when I started doing all this sort of stuff back, 20 years ago. that's how we learned how to do stuff, right? You open a manual and you just read the damn manual. Now it's like, if I need to know something in After Effects, 2 seconds is on YouTube, right? And like,
Yep.
oh, blow my mind. And I'm like, how do we even do it, back in then, right? Like, how did you get
Right.
self-taught yourself? So this is when you're a kid, you're kind of playing around with Flash. But then did you ever go to school to take animation, or you just basically self-taught? What's that background there?
Yeah, I'm basically self-taught. It's a lot of behind the scenes DVDs of really any animated film. I would watch all the behind the scenes of like Ghost in the Shell or what have you, and just study, even going frame by frame with some of the animation on the DVD player, like hitting that slow button and you see every frame. And yeah, just transitioning, and then the internet, obviously, is a huge help. Like anything you need, especially back in the day, you had those sites, the forums. You just have a question. You still have them now, but if you were an animator, you're really into anything on those forums and asking questions, and someone would answer and all be willing to help. And yeah, I pretty much wanted to find out every step of the process of animation. So on my very first short film, Cloud Rise, I looked up every stage from storyboarding to creating a reel to uh, compositing, background paintings, keyframes, in betweens. I wrote down every step of that process, and that's how I made that my first short film. I wanted to focus on one stage at a time and find out how a short film gets made, and that was pretty much my schooling in
Wow.
animation. Yeah,
It was basically just make stuff, which is
pretty
good.
much.
I think that's really kind of how you just got to get your feet wet, right?
Hmm.
And that kind of, I guess, that hooked you, right? It's
Yeah.
funny because Cloud Rise, name of your studio. I funny same thing with me. My first film at a grad film from Emily Carr was I had a meditating bunny in the
Right.
film, and that
Yep.
became the studio name, right? So it's funny how
Uh-huh.
those first films really kind of get you kind of going right into it.
Yeah.
Now, you've made quite a few films up to this point. You've made some shorts, you've made a web series, you've made now a feature-length film. And I'm thinking, like, this is just you doing this stuff ever since the beginning. Do you ever have anybody helping you, or it was just basically Denver, the guy doing the animation, doing everything, doing the pre-production, the post-production, the production? Um,
Uh-huh.
was that always the
Yep.
case?
Pretty much, but on the first short film, Cloud Rise, I shared a studio space. I had a desk, and then there were three other artists in the same space. And one of them, a really good friend of mine, Caleb Haystad, he's been working in animation for a really long time. He went to school for it, and he started teaching me small things here and there while I was working in Cloud Rise. And ever since, every single film, he kind of like looks at something that I'm doing and tries to teach me one extra step, one extra new thing to enhance the animation. And yeah, right now I'm actually working with him on freelance jobs. So all of my personal projects has been solely me on animation. With the web series, I hired a 3D artist to build one ship, and the I think the web series is over an hour long, and it took 8 months to make from conception to end. And I had to really run and gun it, and I hired 3 artists to build a ship, but that took maybe 3 months to get
Oh,
because artists are also working jobs, and this is a small thing that they'll work freelance for me and have 3 months to create something. But it was just a really slow process, and I needed things done really fast. So only got one ship done for the web series. But yeah, now it's pretty nice working on freelance jobs and actually having a budget to get help and animators
yeah,
and
man.
working with artists, especially like it, making the 2 hour animated feature. It's a lonely process doing it all on your own, and now with getting help, you actually get excited and talk with whoever's working on it with you, show someone a shot that you really like, and you get to share in this excitement on a project. um, but yeah, Babylon was an extremely lonely process, just animating that entire thing.
Yeah, and I want to get into that because that still boggles my mind. I think as animators, we always have goals in life, right? One is
Mhm.
to get a series, right? And the
Right.
other is to do a feature film. And
Yep.
basically, you've kind of done both so far because you had the web series, and then that led you to doing the feature length film. And so, looking at that web series, 8 months, man, you almost made a feature length film in 8 months. It's just
Yep.
basically segmented as a web series. And these aren't short web series episodes. They're like, what, 8, 10 minutes long
Yeah.
sometimes, right?
That's
Um,
right.
but it also, this one leads into the feature length film. I haven't watched all the web series, I have to admit, but I did watch the feature length film, and realizing that the web series inspired, or what was the sort of genesis of all of that series and how that kind of came about? Where were their influences? What kind of got you into there?
Yeah, so the web series is based on a script that I wrote right out of high school. I
Hmm.
wrote this feature-length script titled The World Beyond, and it had such a lush and big world. And when we submitted the grant to StoryHive, which was the first Monolith, the web series, I pitched that feature film as a web series. And so the stipulations were that it couldn't be over an hour long, and I sat there trying to cut out scenes from my feature length script, and I couldn't find anything to cut. So I decided to do a spin off show that takes place 50 years before that script and tell the story of one of the characters in that script, but as a younger kid. And doing that, creating that whole story, and it was really rough because it's 8 months, and so it I pretty much had to like I had a co-writer on the web series. She read the feature length script, and I told her the idea of doing a spin-off. And so her name's Erica Muni. She worked on the first Monolith, and we kind of developed that story together. But there wasn't a lot of time for script writing either. So there's a lot of elements that I loved about the web series, and then those same characters move over into the feature length script, Babylon, the next
Okay,
film.
cool.
Yeah, but both are stories that you can just sit down and watch without any context of one or the other. So you can
Oh,
watch Babylon without context of the web series, or the web series without context of Babylon. But yeah.
yeah, because I watched Babylon and I'm like, yeah, this was a standalone film. It felt good. The story
Mhm.
was all there. And I feel I didn't need to have any kind of backstory to really understand what was going on. So I think
Yeah.
that was really successful there. And I guess, in terms of like, let's talk about Babylon, right? The Crown of Babylon. Man, I was like blown away because I'm like, and I'm not, I'm telling you seriously, right? As an animator, as someone who's like looking at this, I'm like, it's gorgeous. Like, it's a beautiful looking film. There's a lot of really great components. You couldn't tell that like one person animated this thing because the backgrounds are gorgeous. Everything's kind of working. But man, I'm sitting there watching this whole thing thinking, how long did this thing take you? Like, that's a process, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
and we're not talking like just simple backgrounds. Like, there's some amazingly rendered backgrounds that are digitally painted. I'm assuming they look really quite actually traditional. And then you've got this like crazy mix of what looks kind of like classical with like 3D, and sometimes it's really hard to sort of decipher what's going on. And I'm
Right.
thinking, man, this can't be easy for you to have pulled off in the amount of time that you probably did. Like, what give me a time frame, man. Like, when did you start this project? When was it done? And tell me like the steps in between that got you there, because it's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. So after finishing the web series, the first Monolith, during that process, we got the Talent to Watch grant from Telefilm, and that was for the next film, the next feature, Babylon. And well, right after that web series, I was so burnt out because everything was hand drawn on that show,
Mm.
and I was trying to give the grant back because I was like, I think I'm done. I think I can't do this anymore because it was just too much. And so they kept trying to convince me to, go along with it and take it and try to come up with a solution to just make a feature. And so I started looking into 3D and looking into how I could utilize 3D to not, damage my hand
Right, carpal
drawing every
tunnel. It's
frame.
it's
Yeah,
real.
yeah. So I started doing a lot of R&D work, and I'd never really done any character animation in 3D. And I used Adobe Mixamo to auto rig characters. So I would basically kit bash characters. I would have a design. Most of the designs came from the web series, and then I would sort of add details and enhance those designs. And then I would look online for 3D models that kind of matched the
Interesting.
elements that I wanted. And so I bought like a whole bunch of 3D models, and then I was basically cutting parts like arms and stuff and putting body parts together. It's
Well, man, it's
gosh,
like the
like
old GI Joes. Remember, you just
yeah,
take GI Joes and take the arms off and like the leg.
exactly,
Okay, so
yeah.
just a 3D computer animation version of that. Okay.
Exactly. And then once I had those models, I started doing a lot of look dev stuff to see how I could develop that into a style that looks 2D, that keeps with the web series style, which is a very anime 2D look.
Mm.
And so I basically came up with a method using like normal maps and a whole bunch of other things and layering them into an After Effects comp. And so when I rendered out the animation, all I had to do is open up that After Effects comp, hit render, and it would all be done for me. The only elements that are fully 2D animated are the faces and the hair and sometimes the hands. Because I find those are the things that audiences kind of look at the most. You're looking at the faces, the eyes, the expressions, and I'm not because this is my first dive into 3D. I didn't know how to really animate in 3D, and so I just ignored the facial rigs, any facial rigs that I
Uh,
needed, because those looked too complicated at that time. And so I ignored that and figured I'd do it all 2D, all hand drawn for the faces, and also that way I can keep a similar style than from the web series as well. And also I love the look of 2D. And so I think incorporating all those together created this unique style that I was happy with. And then moving from there, once I knew I could do it, I said yes to the grant. And then I started writing. I think it was like 2 months, 2 to 3 months of writing. I have like 9 drafts of a script and ended up going back to the first draft and using that. And then it was 2 months of storyboarding. So it was thumbnailing, storyboarding. It was around 2 to 3 months, and then another month of creating the story reel. And that was July. That led me up to July, and then I started animation in July, and then the following year in July completed production on animation.
dude.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it, man. I don't. I have no. So this is. I need to know how you did it because I'm so intrigued. Because you actually drew, like, you still do your storyboards on paper, right? Like,
Yep.
I've seen it. You got a stack of paper. And
Yeah, I
you got
actually brought
scan
up
all
the
this stuff
boards.
in.
Yeah. This entire folder is these are all the thumbnails
Oh
for the
man.
film. Yep. This is how I start thumbnailing all on paper, and I
Wow.
love doing things on paper just because I spend so much time in production on the computer, so it's a nice little break between staring at the screen. And the only pre-production side I can do on paper is storyboarding. Yeah, and like these are all the boards. No, not all of them. This is like half, and this is like the other half.
Dude, like 2 months? Come
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Just
Like, are you not
yeah.
sleeping or something or what? What's the
Getting very
secret?
little sleep.
Okay, so it's true. You sleep what, 2 hours a night? Okay.
Yeah. Pretty much for a lot of Babylon, it was almost around 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night.
Oh.
Yeah. Every single project I do, I get really sick somewhere in production because my immune system just gets shoddy from months of not
Oh
sleeping.
man. I don't know, man. It's like,
I don't recommend anyone do this, by the
yeah, I
way.
was thinking, I'm like, I'm an animator. I get it. I've spent like 8 hours drawing, and by the end of it, I'm like, okay, I really got to stand up, take a break, or do something else.
Yeah.
Whereas you're like just gunning through it all, man, and like, I don't know,
Yeah.
you're pushing yourself. I can tell.
Yeah, I actually during production while animating Babylon, I damaged my back because I'm always sitting and
Oh,
I'm never doing any exercise. And so I damaged my back and I couldn't move for 2 weeks.
oh,
I
seriously?
couldn't even get out of bed.
Oh,
I don't know what, I think it was the stress as well. So it really tensed those muscles and damaged my back somehow. But after that, I started, taking at least an hour to walk around, go for a
okay.
walk, and because
So
that's
that's the
scary.
advice you have for other animators: just get up and have a walk. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess now that I'm getting more technical, I'm a pretty big Luddite when it comes to animation. I just want to draw on paper. So
Right.
I really appreciate that you're doing all your boards on paper and everything else. But now you're in this like kind of interesting mode of the combining 2D with 3D, and man, 3D makes my head spin, right? So the fact that
Mhm.
you're kind of like doing it all and you're compositing it in After Effects, what programs, so how are you doing this? Like, what program are you using to do the 2D animation? What are you doing? How are you doing a 3D animation? How are you copying it together? Tell me the process. Like, what's the full, because this seems like a Denver Jackson like thing that nobody else probably does because they're not insane like you.
Right.
So what is this? Is it a trade
Yeah.
secret? Can you tell me
No, no, I
what
can.
okay.
I don't have any trade secrets. I like because I'm self-taught. I learned from so many different artists online. I like sharing stuff, so it's how I learned, and
Right.
it's how I want to, you know, I'll give away anything.
All right,
So
give it
yeah,
away.
I used for Babylon. I used Cinema 4D, which is a program I bought during the first monolith, and I started playing around with 3D in terms of vehicles. So I wanted to have vehicles and things like that, like 3D ships in monolith, and so I bought that program for that purpose. And at that time, I was looking to Blender as well because it's free. But as soon as I opened up Blender back then, it was felt so complicated.
Mm.
At that time, I use Blender now, and Blender's UI has become so clean and just friendly, user friendly to handle. But Cinema 4D at that time was the most user friendly program for 3D, and so I was using that, and I started learning through that program.
Mm.
And so all the character animations were done in Cinema 4D. Um, as soon as I export or kit bash the models, I'll export them as an OBJ, upload them to the Adobe Mixamo site, and to auto rig it, export a FBX and OBJ FBX, and then import that into Cinema 4D. So I'll have the bones and character rig, and then that's how I would animate. And by the way, the rig is so bare minimum and not that great. Caleb, my director friend, animation director friend, he looked at my rigs and he didn't even understand how I was using those rigs.
No way. Wow.
Yeah. So I was animating all the characters in Cinema 4D. I would export them into the different layers I needed, like normal maps, color flats, shadows, highlights, and then all those layers are imported into After Effects. They
Mm.
auto import into After Effects because I've created a file and sent all those files into one folder that After Effects always looks at. So anytime I update that folder with Cinema 4D exports,
Oh wow.
After Effects knows, and I can render out the template that creates the 2D line work that I like. And so the 2D line work is pretty much in the After Effects files using the normal map with defined edges and a threshold, and then a Luma key to just get the line art. And then I do a roughen edges and I color tint that. And that way it gets almost this brush stroke. There's a lot of fiddling and a lot of,
Wow.
yeah, so it has this like almost brush line stroke on it. And also the textures, I would go into Photoshop before animating. All the textures, I would create my own line work on the textures as well. So any folds in clothing, it would be brush strokes and whatnot. And then all that line work together creates what you see. And then I'll export that out of After Effects. Is this process sounding complicated?
Dude, it sounds like you're a mad scientist, man, and you just concocted the most
Okay.
crazy thing I've ever heard. But anyways, keep going. I'm really intrigued here.
Okay. So I export that as a movie file, the character renders from After Effects, and then I import that into Photoshop, and then I draw over top of that in
But
Photoshop,
oh
and then
man.
I export those as frames, and then I can import them back into After Effects into my comps for each scene.
Whoa, so you actually take the video, bring it into Photoshop, and you're actually just drawing right over top of the video?
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so Photoshop has two versions. There's the video animation you can use, and there's the frame animation. I use video because it cuts down on all the layers that you see on the side.
yeah, right.
So I like using the video animation layer. Photoshop is not the best for animation, but it got the job done, and I still use it even now to this day because it has all my brushes in there, and I just enjoy using it. And then for the 3D or for the backgrounds, that was all anything that's architectural, like man-made, like ships, interiors, houses, cities. I would kit bash things together in 3D, and then I would export that as color flats and then paint over top of it. But anything that's nature, like organic, that's all hand painted.
Wow. So you're
Yeah.
a good artist, man. I appreciate that because some of those backgrounds are pretty intense. I was really digging what you're doing there.
Awesome.
Um, what's really great is that I see the progression, right? Like I've seen
Hmm.
your older work, I've seen your newer work, and obviously there's always going to be this evolution for the artist, right? And I
Exactly.
love that, you're really sort of taking it to new heights, and I think anyone who does a feature length film on their own by themselves is definitely going to come out of it with some pretty mad skills, which I really feel like you've developed over the last few years here that you've been really pushing
Uh-huh.
yourself, man. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing boards now, and I'm looking at the board. I'm already working on my next feature, and I'm doing the storyboards. I'm looking at those storyboards that I'm doing now compared to the ones I did on Babylon, and my drawing skills have improved just immensely from the boards off of Babylon.
Yeah, and like I mean that's amazing, right? And that's sort of all we can really hope for as animators and artists, is that we're always kind of pushing ourselves to be better. Um,
Mhm.
but I guess I really want to focus on this idea of the solo animator, right? Because I'm a control freak, and I admit it, right?
Right.
Like I've got a little bit of OCD tendencies, right? I think you kind of have to be an animator, especially someone who can do classical, because you are really just sort of like little bits of drawing different, things at a time. And I guess sort of with you, do you sort of put yourself in that category of saying you're a little control freaky, that you don't want to, or it's just because I'm assuming the grant gave you probably a little bit more money, that you probably could have hired some stuff out to some junior artists if you wanted to, but it sounds like when I looked at the credits, didn't see many names, man. Didn't see many names. So I figured
No.
you kind of just held court, right?
Uh-huh.
Why? Why? Why do you not trust anybody else, or you just knew that you were going to be the most efficient person for the job? I don't know.
Well, if you're hiring animators, if they're working in a studio space, I can't pay them enough to work full time and to work at the speed that I need things to get done at. And so it wasn't a lot of money, to be honest. The grant we got, we were the first animated film to get that grant. And so everyone else who was part of that program, the Talented Watch program, they were all live action.
Mm.
So I was working with a live action budget, indie live action budget for, animation. So it wasn't a lot of money. Over, I think probably over 60% of the budget went to like post, like
Mm.
sound,
Yeah.
voice, mixing, music. It's a huge chunk that just eats up the budget, right? So there wasn't very much for animation. I want to be working with more animators, and I think that's the next step on the next feature film, especially doing freelance stuff now, and working with Caleb. He's actually doing R&D work on the next. So all the R&D work I was
Okay.
doing on Babylon, he's doing that now for my next feature, and figuring out. It's great because I'll tell him what I want to upgrade on the next feature. Like I really want to focus on a lot of really nice secondary animation that I don't really need to draw, like hair secondary or cloth, and so he's figuring out a way in Blender to just have that pretty much automated and ready to export and ready to go. So they're like little things. I'll give him a list and tell him what I wish I my wish list of what I could have for the next film, and he's figuring all that stuff out. So I'm working with other artists on the next one.
Okay.
um yeah.
Well, that's nice to hear, at least that you can play well with others. It's not just the one man band, I guess, right?
Oh, like
Um,
I said before, it's a lonely process. I don't. I wouldn't say I enjoy it. It's more out of necessity, I think, that I'm making, and also the standard of animation I want to pull off.
mm.
Um, I think it's hard if with the indie budget to pull off what I'm trying to do, and so it's a lot of sleepless nights for me to try and get that pulled off.
So I guess, is it when you were making Babylon or Crown of Babylon, is it really just, is it true that like literally 7 days a week, your schedule is basically wake up and we probably like eat breakfast, animate,
Hmm.
probably skip lunch, eat dinner, animate
Yep.
until wee hours in the morning, sleep for a few hours, and then literally wash, rinse, repeat, right? Was that what it was like for
Yeah, pretty
literally
much.
that entire period?
Yeah, so I would strictly start work at 11 a.m. I won't, you know, as soon as I get up, I'll make sure to set an alarm. I have to start work at 11, no matter what. Every single day, 11 a.m. is when I'm starting to work on Babylon. And I would do, because I'm doing so many different things on the feature at once, I would
Mhm.
be doing like character animation in the morning, and then background paintings in the afternoon, and then character drawovers in the evening, and then compositing at night. So I'd divide my day up between those things. Sometimes I would get carried away with character animation. I'll keep going with character animation until the end of the day. But the I love compositing. So the worst part is leaving compositing till the night, because I will just spend forever
Mhm.
um, compositing, and then before I know it, it's 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or something, and that's when I don't get much sleep. But I'll just get so into compositing. I think I can, when it goes back to being like almost like a perfectionist. I can only do that with compositing. With animation, there's a lot of things I have to let go. So there's so many shots in Babylon that I'm like, I mean, it tells the story, it gets the point across. So I'm just gonna let that go. I can't spend forever finessing and tweaking and making sure all the arcs are right. And for animation, I'm just gonna, it tells the story. There's movement, it sells it, it's good, and then I'll export that. And but with compositing, it's the one place that I tend to spend a lot of time, because you get the final look
Mhm.
from compositing. You get all the color, you get everything put together, all the effects, background, everything. So I spend a lot of time with compositing, and I know I'm pretty confident with compositing. So I know I can make even something that's not that great with animation look kind of good with
Right.
compositing.
No, it's amazing. And I'm learning that too, that After Effects, there's a lot of great plugins, a lot of great effects you can get in there and really make things sparkle and shine
Yeah.
with little minimal effort, right? You know what I mean? To add
Mm.
those effects in, because you had a lot of really beautiful effects, like there's a lot of things happening in the skies. And I'm
Right.
assuming those are all kind of just particle things that you were able to figure out as opposed to
Uh-huh.
animating each one by hand, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I've
you know,
since my first short films, I've sort of built a library of content. I'll even with background paintings. So I'll have really beautifully painted textures, hand painted textures of like concrete or like tree bark or tree trunks or leaves. All of that stuff I'll start with every film. I just throw it in the library, almost like a stock library. So with Babylon, I have a library from all my past work that I've done. That's so when I start background painting, just throw that stuff in, and a lot of the base is done, and then I can go in and finesse things and
okay.
make sure
So
all the color is good.
there's some shortcutting
Yeah,
that's
there are some
happening here. It's not
shortcuts.
just
Yeah,
recreating, redoing the wheel here, which is really nice.
yeah.
So good. So yeah, this is great. The voice acting is great too. How do you find the talent? Is it people you've worked with before and other stuff, or like, because that's a process too. You've got to find the right talent, because feature film, it's one thing for it to look pretty,
Hmm.
but you still have to have convincing performances to go along with the acting, right? And you
Yeah.
are basically making everyone act, but we need the voice talent to really bring it to life. What's the process there in terms of finding the right talent?
So for Babylon, we brought in the same actors that were in Monolith, because they're playing the same characters, so it just makes sense to bring them back. And for the rest of the cast, we sent out auditions, and we got so many auditions because I released a teaser trailer, and I think that got a lot of people hooked and wanting to audition. It was all non-union as well, because of the budget, and so we put a call out for all non-union actors, and there was, oh, it was insane. It was like 100 hours or something of just audio audition tracks. Sitting,
Wow.
it's like 3 days of just sitting and listening to voices to try and like pick the right ones for the characters. It was a lot of time listening to auditions. We got a lot of auditions for Babylon, and it was great. It's some of the voice actors were really good, and I have them like cataloged for something else, and which is a pity I couldn't hire them on Babylon, but having them there for say like something in the future down the road, I just
Right.
have them in that Gmail account, their audition there. Um, but yeah, it was really cool, the voice acting process or the voice auditioning process. And then because of COVID, I usually like to be in the studio space with voice actors. I feel like I can communicate more one-on-one in person a
Mhm.
lot nicer and better. And especially for the voice actors, I think some of them, I it might I got a friend who comes back from the web series, and he told me later that he actually thought I was going to be in the studio, and he was super nervous because I wasn't there, and just seeing my face on a monitor.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, we did it over Zoom, and it was. I mean, it was fun. Uh, I do like being in the studio space. We got to do some of the auditions here in or the recordings here in Victoria, and I got to be in the studio space with a mask and everything, and
Okay.
that was amazing. That was a lot of fun. But I do like leaving the house
Yeah, I
to
was
go.
thinking like, yeah, with COVID, it obviously for a lot of us, it was an interesting time, especially for animators, because we could still
Mhm.
make stuff. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah,
weren't, we weren't dealing with big crews essentially, unless
yeah.
work from home.
Hmm.
So I guess ideally, like if there was ever a time to make a film by yourself, it probably would have been during this crazy pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but now what? It's like the film's released. Well, I watched the film. I don't know. Have you? What's the launch
It's
time with the film?
just beginning its festival circuit now, the festival
Okay,
run
so
now.
you're gonna
Yes.
festival it. You're gonna run it. What's the end goal? Are you hoping to get theatrical? Are you hoping to kind of like a wide release? What are you hoping to do with the film now?
I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm learning a lot about what happens with a feature because this is my first feature. So
Yeah.
I'm learning the way things are distributed and with sales agents and how things are taken to theatrical. So learning a lot of different things, taking a lot of meetings with sales and distribution,
Mm.
and just finding out. There's like the percentage and stuff, the minimum guarantees that they give you for the film, things like that. Uh, and a lot of that, because I'm making my next feature in the same world. I also can't sell the IP, otherwise I can't make the next thing.
Yep.
So it's I'm not sure. I might. I have no idea yet. I have no idea what the process would be.
It's
I have something in mind that, in terms of what I think, but we'll see.
No, it's true. In marketing, it was Orson Welles, I think, always said like filmmaking is 98% hustle, 2% making a movie. It's no way to
Hmm.
live a life, right?
Yeah.
And really, you did the impossible. You made a feature film by yourself, but at the same time now, like it's just a big of a process to get this thing out into the world, right? And
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure you've got people helping you get
Hmm.
yourself through that hurdle as well
Yep.
too. But yeah. So any kind of news on the festival front yet, or are we keeping that under wraps? Anything, any premieres coming up that we know about or can talk about?
Nothing yet to announce. It just was at the Cannes Film Market, the
Okay.
Frontiers. That was cool. It had its world premiere in Shanghai.
Hmm.
So that was nice. I wish I could have gone. And
Yeah, tough time, hey.
yeah.
But I think at
Um,
least you're in a good place where things might start to pick up again with festivals, right? Might be able to
yeah.
be there in person again.
Yeah, usually right after a big project, I like to go traveling. I like to get out the house. I like to actually get into socialize again. Because when making any big project, even the web series, I actually turn off every single notification that I have on my phone or computer. So I don't get any interference from anyone, which leads to me not answering a lot of messages through the 2 year process. But yeah, it's as soon as I finish a film, I want to go out and travel. Festival circuits are really fun to do that with. And yeah, you got as a filmmaker, you kind of need to live a life a bit as well to incorporate into your work. So right from life is what they say. I kind of miss that. But yeah, right now I'm just jumping into the next thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess we probably didn't really talk a lot about your inspirations to things because there's a very heavy anime influence in your work. Obviously, there's some Miyazaki, especially in the not younger, but the older work I've seen of yours, and
Mhm.
obviously there's a definite kind of like anime flair to this stuff. Is that something that you kind of obviously really seeps into your veins? Like, is it something that you're very influenced by and that you really like that? Because it's sort of it is and it isn't, right? It's kind of sci-fi
Right.
anime based. What is the sort of the inspiration with that sort of style, that look, that anime-esque kind of feel?
Yeah, I think the very first time I wanted to actually was interested in diving into animation was when I was like 14, and I was Don Bluth,
Mm,
his work, and but every single frame is hand drawn, and then right after, right as soon as I came to Canada during grade 10, I was introduced to Ghibli,
mm,
and I realized that not every frame needs to be drawn like 24 frames or 12 frames. You
sure.
can actually have frame holds, and that blew my mind. And so I really got into anime in grade 10 and started watching a lot of anime and seeing what you can get away with limited animation. And that kind of became my thing, because doing a solo project, I that's kind of the only way I can see myself doing it, is with limited animation, the same way anime does things. And so there's a lot of frame holds and things like that. Not every frame is drawn. Um, and yeah, inspiration wise, like I definitely Ghibli, Miyazaki stuff. I remember watching the very first, my very first Ghibli introduction was Spirited Away, and I can
Mm,
still remember watching it and feeling like I'm there, like on that train with Chihiro on the water. Um, it was incredible, and it just drew me in. And so yeah, Ghibli stuff. For Babylon, it was a lot of mostly a lot of video games actually. Recently, um, like the Uncharted series was a huge influence. Breath of the Wild is a really huge influence to me. I can't wait for the next one. And yeah, more video games these days. Indiana Jones, I guess Babylon has a very Indiana Jones influence, very
mhm.
adventure. Matrix is a big influence on my work. Uh, yeah, just a lot of anime as well, like uh, Hoshida, the Mirai director. Yeah, there's various things that will pop up uh, that I actually have callbacks, or like specific shots sometimes that I will want to try and pay tribute to those works that I'm inspired by. And so sometimes I'll try and find one shot in my movie to pay tribute to one of those
Right.
films that I'm inspired by. Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's good. And I also noticed too that you definitely kind of like focus a lot on diversity too, right? You know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
that I would like to assume the lead is Asian, right?
Hmm.
And I'm part Asian. I'm looking at you. I'm
Yep.
thinking you're Asian.
Uh-huh.
How much does diversity, this is always really important these days, right? Because
Right.
representation is so important in film and video. How much does
Hmm.
that play into your work? Like, do you find that it was important for you to have an Asian lead and Asian characters and Black characters as well, intermixed with the whole process of making, your series and now the feature?
Right.
Yeah, can you talk a bit about sort of how diversity might play a role in your storytelling or just
Yeah.
representation?
I mean, the reason I'm making films is because of Jackie Chan. And when I was in South Africa, I loved movies, but I never thought I could do it until I saw Jackie Chan. And I was also the only Asian kid in my school. So not, I never really saw anyone that looked like me. And then suddenly watching a film on TV that it had an Asian lead doing all this stuff, it really motivated me and inspired me to make films. And I think that's important. Like, if you don't see someone that kind of looks like you on TV, you kind of think that something is impossible. Um, so having diversity in my work, I think, just to inspire people that are, you know, not represented in that spectrum, is really important, because I was inspired by,
Right.
yeah.
That's rad. I think I appreciate that too. Just as someone who also finds it very important to, have a diverse voices in our films, right? And
Hmm.
obviously diverse
And
characters.
also, it's not a hard thing to do. So why
No, it
not?
is not a hard thing to do. You know what I mean? It's pretty easy to sort of have a diverse cast of characters. It
Exactly.
doesn't always have to be this
Yeah.
whitewashed film, but it's cool, man. So I guess, really kind of looking forward, the end goal of all this for you, obviously you love to animate, it's a passion, it's something you loved as a kid,
Hmm.
but I guess it's sort of like, you know, there's always this end goal, right? Because without audiences, what's the point, right? If
Right.
nobody's watching your films, what's the point? If you don't or aren't growing this fan base, what's the point? So like in terms of this fan base, and obviously you've made this web series, now you're going to make this feature. It's important for you as the brand, you know, like Denver Jackson, the animator, who's this rock star animator who's doing everything, to grow this brand. How aware of you are you that, you know, it's important as an animator, as a director, as someone who's making independent works, especially by yourself. And this is to me a pretty big selling point, you know, to your work, to say,
Right.
hey, I did this all myself. To, I guess, grow that brand. Like, how are you doing that? Are you engaging people, going to Comic Cons? Like, what's sort of the end goal with the growing the brand, I guess, or growing the IP?
Right. I've got three feature ideas that I want to make right now. I've thumbnailed the whole next feature in the S Luna world. The other two features after that, one is actually a drama,
Mhm.
based on my grandmother's life, and
Oh
the other
wow.
is a sci-fi, uh, kind of like very strict sci-fi film. Also more of a drama sci-fi. So I have different ideas. I want to just keep making movies, honestly. And from doing Babylon, even when I was in the thick of it, I didn't know if I would be able to finish it. I had no idea. I was just working away, and I know at any time I could, like, say my back gave out. That would be the end of production if I can't go back to work.
Sure.
Um, so doing Babylon was a great lesson for me to know what my limitations were.
Mhm.
And now I feel more comfortable jumping onto the next feature. I know I can do it. I know where my limitations are, with that. And yeah, I just want to keep making films, really. And yeah, like you said, engaging with audiences. Anyone who loves anything I make, always open to talking. I get lots of messages from people about how I do things, and
Mhm.
I'll always answer those messages. I love teaching, so
Oh, good. Cool.
yeah, I love telling people
You
how.
should have a whole series of, like, you know, that's your next series is, you know, this teaching series, because I'm sure like there's other people out there that want to learn how to animate. And
Mhm.
obviously animation to me is a very existential process, you know what I mean? Like we're very
Yeah,
alone, we're in our
right.
own environments.
Yep.
You know, and I feel like it's one of those things that it can be very meditative, right? And I've always
Mhm.
looked at animation as a very meditative process. And I kind of feel like you probably do the same as well, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it'd be really cool to sort of see this sort of Denver Jackson instructional series from you at some point.
Yeah, someone recommended that I should do a Patreon, and I have Patreon, but I'm not really that active on it. But I should actually, for I was thinking for my next film that I'm making here, maybe just documenting the entire process on Patreon. And I think that might be really cool for people to see. They can see that whole journey, from beginning to end, from storyboarding to final product, and see how it gets made. Um, that might be a good way to do it. We'll see.
Well, I think you should. You know, I think that that's a really great way to brand yourself and to grow that fan base and to get loyal followers, right? Because at the end of the day, we need those followers and those people who
Mhm.
appreciate our work to really champion our work too,
Yeah. Yep.
and get the word out and promote for us. So I think that's a good Patreon. I think sounds like it right up your alley, and that's probably good if you are spending all this time helping other people out for free. It's good to kind of at least get a bit of revenue coming in,
Right.
because I don't know, like man, you're starting your next film, you're boarding it out. I've seen, you know, on social media, you know, showing the boards. But are you
Yeah.
doing this like you funding yet? Or are you just because you're crazy and you just want to make more stuff? Like what's going on with that?
Yeah, so there's no funding yet. I don't have any funding for that, but in between, I'm working on freelance jobs. So CloudRise has gotten a few clients, after Babylon, and with some decent budgets, and I'm willing to, or I've been able to pay other artists and
Okay.
have them help out. And then on my downtime, like weekends, I would start working on my next film. And right now, one of the, like Caleb, he's been helping out on all the freelance stuff, and I've been paying him and pretty well. And so now he's just wanting to help out on the next feature as well and doing all that R&D work. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, having someone there to work. Every single day he'll like send me little things that he's working on. But I mean that just makes me want to jump into Blender and start playing instead of storyboarding as well. So it's a little hard. It's He's kind of inspiring me to want to play in Blender.
Wow. I know. I
Yeah.
hear Blender's the thing, man. Like people are really gravitating towards
Yeah.
using it as this
Yeah.
great
So
animation
I
platform.
think right after Babylon, the very first freelance gig I got, I really wanted to learn Blender,
Mm,
and that was our goal. So Caleb and I didn't know Blender. I came from Cinema 4D. Caleb was a Maya person, and so we both decided to learn Blender on the one project, the freelance project. And that's the best way to learn something, is
yeah.
having a project to actually like figure out things with. And yeah, Blender's just, it's incredible. It's mind-blowing how great the software is.
Mm,
And the community for Blender is also really great too. Whenever you need something, you just on Twitter, you'll hashtag Blender if you have a question. um, because I think because it's open source as well, there's a greater community there to just
right.
people wanting to help out. So yeah, Blender's is really good.
Nice. Well,
Uh-huh.
it makes it kind of inspires me to maybe jump into it, man. Like I said, I'm a little bit slow with technology, but I keep hearing these great things about all these programs. It sounds like you're
Yeah.
really utilizing all of
Hmm.
these things to come together to make your films. So
Yeah.
it's exciting to sort of see what's next. And I guess we know what's next, as we've been talking about what's next. You're boarding out your next project.
Yep.
But I guess that next step would be probably just board it out and then try to go after some more funding to fund that process. Is that the next step for you? Like what really is next for you?
Yeah. So right now I'm boarding the next one, and I have a producer actually going out to look for funding. But he does his thing, and then I'm just going to make the movie.
Right.
So if he manages to find more funding and we can hire more artists, then great. Then I'll hire more artists. That will be amazing. But right now, I tend not to put a lot of weight on getting or relying on a funding source. So I'm pretty confident I can just make it. And anyone who wants to like help and fund and come on board, that's awesome too. But yeah, I'm just gonna make it, I think.
Man, like I said, you are the hardest working person in animation that I think I know. And, it's been a huge pleasure to chat with you tonight. I guess I like to leave it and just sort of open it up and say, if you have advice for anyone who's crazy enough to want to enter into this crazy sort of world of animation, what's your biggest sort of, what do you tell people who are thinking about it? Are you like, run, far away. Don't do it. You're not going to sleep anymore, and you're going to get carpal tunnel syndrome, and you're going to be smashing your head against the monitor.
Right.
No, but like honestly, like if you had young students or somebody come up to you saying, "Man, I really want to do this," what's your biggest piece of advice?
Yeah, it varies. If they want to do a solo project like I'm doing, um, take it one step at a time. Don't just focus on storyboards, and that's your project, and then finishing those boards. I think that's my biggest, what I would recommend, is just because a movie can be so overwhelming that if you start thinking about every stage of the process, you might quit and you won't get it made. But if you just think about just one stage at a time, I'm just going to thumbnail the whole movie. I'll get that done, and that's my project for the next month. And then thumbnail that whole thing. Don't think about anything else. Don't think about animation. Don't think about, just focus on what's in front of you and get that done. And then before you know it, you have a film.
You do. And like I said, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I'm super impressed by what you were able to put together in such a short amount of time by yourself, all alone, secluded
Thanks,
in this
Jeff.
little office space of yours there, the
Uh-huh.
studio. It's remarkable and unbelievable, and something that I'm still in awe of, right? I'm so stoked to talk to you because I could talk to you probably for another 5 hours, but I know that you're a busy guy and that's not going to happen. But I just want to say, like I'm super like just in awe of everything you're doing, and really appreciative of the fact that you've given us some time to talk about your process.
Yeah,
And
anytime. It's my pleasure.
yeah, and I think what's great is that you're keeping it up, and you got more coming up your sleeve, and and I'm really excited for audiences to see the Crown of Babylon, and get to witness all of your hard work coming to fruition. I hope at least did you at least take a day off after like you finished the film, you watched it. How's that? That's gotta feel like amazing, man. To like that last push render on your button on After Effects and rendering out that
Right.
last sequence or rendering out the last like ProRes version of your QuickTime file on
Uh-huh.
Premiere and then watching it and being like, dude, I'm done. But did you feel like a sense of emptiness or a sense of completion, or did you feel like
I
what's that feeling like?
I think it was a lot of relief. Like it felt really good, and
I'd hope so.
I took the day off,
Oh, you
and
did you? Okay.
yeah, yeah. But also right after hitting that render, the next day, you know, I still had post production to get done,
Mm.
and voice actors to record, and all of getting the mix done and everything. So there's still a ton of work after that, but for the animation process, it felt really great.
Oh, and did you actually take a break after the whole film was done? Like you got that final master? Did you do something like go celebrate, at least have a drink or something?
Uh, Not really. You know,
Oh
COVID
man.
was around, and so I didn't really have a chance to do that. Just jumping right into the freelance work, and but right now, I mean, I'm taking it easy. I'm storyboarding it, the next film at a slower pace.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not you're getting more than 2 hours of sleep a night, I hope.
yep, I am.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. Well, Denver, you know what, man? Like I said, it's been a huge pleasure. I'm super in awe of what you're doing. I can't wait for everyone to get to watch your film and the fact that they can watch your previous stuff too online, right? Where's the best
Yep.
place for people to go to do that?
Yeah, you can just go to the cloudrise.com site, or you can go to the YouTube channel. It's also at Cloudrise Pictures. And yeah, Twitter, it's Cloudrise Ltd, I believe. And then Instagram is Cloudrise Pictures. So if you want to follow any of that social media stuff. And I think there's one on Facebook too, that gets updated as well. So yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to apologize now for all the DMs you're going to get probably from this interview, and people will be like, dude, you do what with what and how you combine that with that? Tell me more about this. But I think get that Patreon up and running and start charging people for your knowledge, man, because that knowledge is gold. Cool, man. Well, you know what? Thanks again for your time. And like I said, can't wait to see what's up your sleeve. And like I
Yeah.
said, everyone needs to follow you on social media so you can watch how crazy you are and all the crazy little bonus things that you're throwing out at the world, like those little Star Wars clips you were doing.
Right.
And like, I'm like, dude, you're doing that for fun? Like, what the heck, man? In between making a feature film. I don't know, man. Like I said,
Yeah.
there are enigmas in the world and you are one of them. So thanks again, Denver. That was great.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a real pleasure. Thanks, Jeff.
Have a good evening.